Hey, listen, so I don't know how many of y'all catch this, but during worship, Wes is our band director, and there was a small moment where his mic was coming through the monitors or the speakers, and it sounded like Boys to Men. It sounded like we were singing a beautiful harmony. It was like, it's okay, baby. You know I love you. You know God loves you. Because he's directing the band. And the only time you hear anything about the sound guys is when something, I can hear it right here. How many of y'all heard it? If you're online, you probably didn't hear it. I hope not. But if you were here, you heard it. So one other person, but this is the way my ears work. It's church planter ears. But the only time we recognize our sound and production crew is when something goes AWOL. And so can we take a minute? Can we just thank all of our sound and production for all they do? Come on, give them a shout. You know y'all be watching from home in your warm pajamas. Because of these guys, they make it all possible. Thank you so much to our sound and our production. We love y'all. We're so grateful. We don't know what we're not supposed to be able to do as a church. And so we keep grinding, and we're out here reaching people, getting ready to launch our campus in Oakland, Maryland. Oakland, Maryland, what's up? We love y'all. We got watch parties going on in Oakland. So good to see you. Y'all welcome Oakland, Maryland into the feed. We love you guys. So excited about all the guys doing. We're sitting here complaining about how cold it is, and Oakland's got about 4 feet of snow right now. And so in Virginia Beach, y'all be grateful as you sip on your lattes and you're bundled up in your sweaters, and it's 53 outside, all right? But I'm grateful, man. I'm grateful for the warm weather. I grew up in Oakland, and listen, it's cold. You get up on that wisp, on that ski lift, and it gets about 20 below, and your fingers, you can't feel them. That's when the skiing is at its best, you know? That's when things get good. How many of you hate being late? Yeah, and how many of you, that feeling of being late, it creates an anxiety and a tension deep within your soul that you're ready to fist fight anybody who gets in your way? Thank you. 7 of you are spiritual. The rest of you are liars. I am that guy. I am ready to physically assault in a bad way when I'm late. I hate being late. In fact, I'll call, and the other day Pastor Corey was like, hey, bro, I'm running late. We had our podcast. She said, I'm running late. I was actually 20 minutes early. That's how crazy I am about being late. I am a stickler. I tell our team all the time, 5 minutes early, baby. Why? You're not late if you're 5 minutes early, but you're on time because I don't want to start a meeting as you walk in. Be on time. It's important, right? It's a preparation thing for me. How many of you have heard the age-old, many of you might have heard this age-old illustration, this story. That's why I'm going to tell it, where the guy who said, I'm waiting on the Lord to save me, and there was a hurricane coming into his town, and the floodwaters are going to rise. Anybody heard this? Okay, those of you who grew up in youth group, maybe. There's a guy who's saying, I'm going to wait on God to deliver me, and a sheriff comes to his door, and he says, hey, man, the flood's going to get bad. You need to get out of here. And he says, I'm not leaving my house. I'm going to let God save me. And so the water continues to rise. And as it continues to go up to the second floor, a buddy in his boat comes by. And when his buddy in the boat comes by, he gets to the front and he says, hey, is there music or is it just me? He said, hey. He said, you got to get out of the house, man. You're going to die. He said, man, God's going to save me. I'm not getting out the house. God's going to save me. He's got me. And so then the floodwaters rise all the way up to the second story. And he ends up on the roof, and a helicopter comes by. And it says, hey, man, we're going to lower the basket. Get in the basket or you're going to die. The floodwaters rise. He said, man, I'm not worried about no floodwaters. God is going to save me. And so the helicopter comes in and he leaves, and then the floodwaters rise and it overtakes the man and he dies. Is that the most anticlimactic story you've ever heard in your life? But he gets to heaven and he says to God, Lord, I was there. I was doing what you called me to do. I was believing in you. I was waiting for you. And God said, yeah, and I sent a sheriff. I sent your friend in a boat, and I sent the helicopter. And you didn't take any of them, and so now you're here. This isn't what I had either, but it's what you chose. And I'm curious today, when you think about this concept, what are you waiting on God for? But he's actually waiting on you to act. So I'm just going to believe in the Lord. I'm going to trust in God. Let me give you this reflection that I can tell you that's usually consistent with people waiting on God to act, is that there's so many people unteachable because nobody is holy enough to teach you. And so when your life goes AWOL, the first thing you do is start criticizing your pastors or your church or spiritual people or pastors that are known, and you listen to their message, you start tearing them apart. Nobody's holy enough to lead your life. And so why do you think you continually have strife? Because none of us are good enough. This is the story of this man. You somewhere long enough and you think, well, They're detestable. They're lying. They're not giving us the truth. I messed up in my life, but the pastor's really the one who has trouble. That was a quick out, baby. We're already done. All right, let's wrap this thing up. But there's this part in us that we think that God is going to do it, but we're unteachable because nobody's holy enough to teach us. Nobody's holy enough to hold the course for 10 years of our life, because we just think now there's things that we don't really agree with anymore. Is that the case, or is it that you have things in your life that you need to be taught? This is what's happening in Exodus as we get ready to go to the place where all these plagues are happening. And something you need to realize in your life and in the life of a church and in the life of an organization, but in your life particularly, is that God is moving amongst us. But so is Satan. And that's why we don't understand all the time. Just like last week, we talked about counterfeit faith and how things appear to be God, but they aren't. Listen, we are all preparing for something or recovering from something, but you have to start thinking, what is it that you're actually preparing for? What's the end result here? Listen, I love you, and I love you with all of my heart, but the world doesn't need your voice. We don't need you in your pain to tell us all how good God is. We need you in your pain to let God speak to you about your pain. We feel like we have to constantly minister because this will encourage somebody. That person doesn't need you. They need God, and there are other people God can put in their pathway. What happens is we think that we are holier because holiness adds value to us. We feel like when we can pour out that now we're valuable because we can bring people to Jesus. But we need to realize that our value has already been paid for. God, when Jesus died on the cross, he paid a price. Your value is already equivalent. I can't tell you the amount of people that I have counseled or sat down with that it comes down to a father issue in their life. And I can't tell you the amount of people who have been mad at me as a pastor because they have had problems with their father and the value in their life. You see, what happens is an authority in people's lives, you take on the authority that has hurt them the most and they need you to fix it. The reason that many of you are having trouble with your relationship with the Lord is because he is that dad in your life. You just can't get past the idea that he's at everything you do, that he loves you, and that it's unconditional. So we have trouble accepting God for who God is. Does this make sense? The relationships in your life have painted a portrait of Jesus that's inaccurate because Jesus is not any relationship you've ever had before in your life. And so what does is it ends up putting us on this downward spiral, and we don't hang in the tight spots. I can't tell you the amount of people that I've watched be faithful to God, and then it got close to the end, and they jumped out. I'm thinking, what are you doing? This is where it's about to go down. They're thinking, it's just been too much, too long. And they go on, and their life is fine, but it's not great. Why? Because God has something so great, but they can't hang on that long. I'm preparing for something, and my question is, what is it that you're preparing for? Because the title of today's message is Prepare for the Promise. And we're going to get through 4 chapters today. We're jumping through Exodus. We're going to be done by next week. 4 chapters. We get to the place where Moses was called. He goes back to Egypt. He has Aaron as his voice, and he gets in front of the Pharaoh, and their staff becomes a serpent, and Aaron's staff becomes a serpent, and the magicians, they counterfeit the miracle. And we talked last week about counterfeit faith and things that they look like God, but they're not God. And we wonder why our faith isn't real is because it's not God. It's built on things. It's built on aesthetics. It's built on diplomacy and not dedication. And so in Exodus chapter 7, it starts the plagues, the 10 plagues that hit Egypt to push Pharaoh's hand to let his people go. Everybody say, here we go. You guys know I could have gone real wrong. All you football fans know I could have gone real dirty right there. Exodus chapter 7, verse 19. It says, then the Lord said to Moses, tell Aaron, take your staff and raise your hand over the waters of Egypt, all its rivers, canals, ponds, and all the reservoirs. Turn all the water to blood. Everywhere in Egypt, the water will turn to blood, even the water stored in the wooden bowls and stone pots. But again, everybody say, but again, the magicians, those stinky magicians, you guys. It says they use their magic, and they too turned water into blood, and so Pharaoh's heart remained hard. He refused to listen to Moses and Aaron, just as the Lord predicted. The things and the danger of things that look like God but aren't God. Everybody say, it's fake. They just had this sleight of hand, this magic. And you might say, well, how does somebody actually do the miracle? It wasn't the same miracle. It could have been a magician type of miracle. They were called magicians. You've watched magicians that you still don't know how they pulled the rabbit out the hat, but it happened. No matter how much you do it on it, that happened. You don't know how he stayed underwater for 3 days without any oxygen, but it happened. You don't know how they swallowed a sword, but you saw them swallow a sword. It's a sleight of hand. They're not supernatural. There is a movement. There is something they did to create a counterfeit. Exodus chapter 8, so that's the plague of blood. The plague of frogs, it says, the Lord said to Moses, tell Aaron, raise the staff in your hand over all the rivers, canals, and ponds of Egypt, and bring the frogs over the land. So Aaron raised his hand over the waters of Egypt, and the frogs came up and covered the whole land. But the magicians, everybody say, those magicians, they were able to do the same thing. They can multiply frogs. Of course they could. They just go out back and grab a couple and bring them back in. So, but they too caused the frogs to come up on the land of Egypt. But when Pharaoh saw the relief had come, he became stubborn. He refused to listen to Moses and Aaron, just as the Lord predicted. Everybody say stubborn Pharaoh. You feel we're headed in a dark spot today, boys. In Exodus chapter 8, it says, so the Lord said to Moses, tell Aaron, raise your staff, strike the ground. The dust will turn into swarms of gnats throughout the land of Egypt. This is the finger of God, the magicians exclaimed. Everybody say, those magicians. They exclaimed to Pharaoh, but Pharaoh's heart remained hard. He wouldn't listen to them just as the Lord predicted. I want to know, how is it that as a magician, you can duplicate frogs, but gnats, that's the one I can't get to. I just want to know, what happened where they hit the stone wall at this point? Why was it that the frogs were something they could duplicate, the blood something they could replicate, but when it came to the gnats, that was the one where they said, this must be God. Curious. Those flying little buzzards, what is it about them? They couldn't do it. So Exodus chapter 8, verse 20, it says, then the Lord told Moses, get up early in the morning. See, many of y'all right there would have disobeyed God. That would have been where y'all just said, I'm good. I'm good. Get up in the morning and stand in Pharaoh's way as he goes down to the river and say to him, this is what the Lord says, let my people go so they can worship me. And the Lord did just as he had said. A thick swarm of flies filled Pharaoh's palace and the house of his officials. The whole land of Egypt was thrown into chaos by the flies, and Pharaoh remained stubborn. Everybody say stubborn Pharaoh. Exodus chapter 9. It says, if you continue to hold them and refuse them to let them go, the hand of the Lord will strike your livestock, your horses, donkeys, camels, cattle, sheep, goats with a deadly plague. And the Lord did just as he had said. The next morning, all the livestock of the Egyptians died, but the Israelites did not lose a single animal. Everybody say, stubborn Pharaoh. I mean, we got gnats, we got blood, we got dead animals. This is really turning out to be a bad thing for Egypt. And then in Exodus chapter 9, verse 8, it says, so the Lord said to Moses, take handfuls of soot from a brick kiln and have Moses toss it in the air while Pharaoh watches. And the ashes will spread like fine dust over the whole land of Egypt, causing festering boils to break out on people and animals throughout the land. And so they took the soot from a brick kiln and went and stood before Pharaoh. As Pharaoh watched, Moses threw the soot in the air, and boils broke out on people and animals alike. Even the magicians were unable to stand before Moses because the boils had broken out on them and all the Egyptians. Y'all thinking, any basketball fans in here? Any NBA fans? Does anybody read this passage and see LeBron James, or is it just me? Unbelievable. LeBron got his move out of Exodus. When I read this, I think of taking handfuls of soot, have Moses toss it in the air while Pharaoh watches. This is what he's doing. Everybody cheers. Pharaoh, how you like that, boy? Anybody ever had boil? You don't have to admit that. It's disgusting. Some of y'all raised your hands. See, LeBron James did the Moses. Moses didn't do the LeBron James. You know what I'm saying? I have boils. I'm going to confess openly to all of you today in the presence of God and all my friends. When I was in high school, I got this boil on my forehead from when I was playing football. My helmet kept rubbing, and it ended up sticking out like a unicorn. It was big. I mean, that thing came out a good 2.5 inches past my forehead, to where my trainer was like, hey, if that thing don't go down, you're going to have to go to the hospital just to get that thing lanced so we can relieve pressure because it's going to get up in your brain stems. I was like, well, that doesn't sound very good. So that day I was in practice, and somebody hit me, and all of a sudden I was like, man, it's like November. Why am I sweating? The Lord delivered me right there in the middle of practice. So that night I went home, and I put hot compresses on it, And the next day, I looked great, like nothing had ever happened. Well, fast forward 3 years, I was in college, and I got another one in the same exact spot. And I'm thinking, you got to be kidding me. This has got to be some kind of crude joke for God to allow Satan to manifest himself in the form of a boil in the middle of my forehead, in the middle between my eyes. So in college, I had the same thing. I started unicorning it once again, walking around, having to move my head before I get into a door so it didn't smash my face on a wall. But just like before, the Lord delivered me, and all was good. But I will tell you this, boils are hot and painful. I had one in my ear a couple years ago. Don't know how I get them, but I had one deep in my ear, and I woke up from a nap, and I was like, man, why is my inner ear sweating, right? Boil. I was like, I knew it was itchy, but my point is this. If you've ever had one, I can't imagine having multiple. And I can't imagine them being all over my body. And I can't imagine the discomfort because everything is hot and every pressure point is enlightened. And so when you think about these plagues, we can fly through them and say, oh, the plague of gnats. How many of y'all are in the summertime and you're sitting out with your kids watching them play, and it's 178 here in Virginia Beach, and you're sipping on your whatever it is you got, and the bugs are all over, and you're like, gosh, I just hate staying outside. I hate it out here. And your husband's like, what's wrong? Or your wife is like, what's wrong? Like, there's just bugs everywhere. I hate it. And then you go inside and you watch from inside and you're like, this is the life, air conditioned. It's like the same thing it is in March, but you love summer. For what reason? You go inside and you watch outside, right? But how many of y'all, you hate the bugs? Or how many of y'all, those godforsaken little things we like to call mosquitoes, right? But how many of you like when you have gnats around your face? You feel like you can't breathe. Now, I don't want you to think of this as gnats that flew into a country. I want you to think of it as when you breathe in, they go with you. These are not things and plagues that were inconveniences. These were plagues that stopped society. And it's interesting because do you think that there was a time where Moses and Aaron said, God, we're doing all these things, but you haven't delivered us? Can you explain to us what's happening here? Because we've been faithful. I was in a desert for 40 years tending your sheep, and then I came up to this bush that was on fire, and I really regret answering that doorbell. And here I am. I've got Aaron here. Now he's lifting up his staff, and things are turning into snakes, and he's going out and he's shouting over top of the Nile, and gnats are flying in, and these frogs are everywhere. Now there's boils all over the place, and the water has turned to blood. The Egyptians are having to dig up around the Nile just to get fresh water because the Nile is full of blood. Like, at any point, do you think maybe you could just let us out of here? Because I don't really understand the purpose of the journey. I'm really trying to get to the destination. I would really appreciate if you would just deliver us. I don't know about you, but that's my prayer most of the time. I really appreciate what you're trying to do here and the way you're trying to use my life to just really impact a lot of people. But at any point, God, if you could take a step back from your throne and look at the one I'm sitting on, I would appreciate you give me deliverance now. But maybe God's asking you for once to stop praying for deliverance and start praying for revelation. Maybe start praying for the things that are going to help your journey. Maybe the things that are going to stick after you're delivered. Because see, deliverance is a moment, but the revelation is something that's built into your spirit. And so I wonder if Moses and Aaron thought that, but then I think, well, not so much. Do you know why? Because they were built for this. Moses and Aaron had withstood so much to get to the point where they could stand in front of a Pharaoh in his court, not worried about death, and he could declare that God is my God, and you're going to see him. Here comes the gnats, here comes the frogs, here comes the blood, and they continued the course. Why? Because they had already built the resiliency in the journey. They had already known what God was going to do, and they stayed true to what he was going to do, and they stayed faithful to him. This is where a lot of us get lost because nobody is holy enough to lead us. Nobody is holy enough to teach us. Nobody can actually take us where we're going. So in Exodus chapter 9, verse 23, it says, so Moses lifted his staff towards the sky. And the Lord sent thunder and hail and lightning flash toward the earth. And the Lord sent a tremendous hailstorm against all the land of Egypt. Never in the history of Egypt had there been a storm like that with such devastating hail and continuous lightning. But Pharaoh remained stubborn. Everybody say, Pharaoh remained. And it's interesting to me because a storm that changed the course of history, but it didn't change Pharaoh. Can I get a handheld? I think this thing's about ready to go out on me. Exodus chapter 10, verse 12. It says, and the Lord said to Moses, raise your hand over the land of Egypt to bring on the locusts. Let them cover the land and devour every plant that survived the hailstorm. So Moses raised his staff over Egypt, and the Lord caused an east wind to blow over the land all the day and through the night. And when the morning arrived, thank you, brother, the east wind, when the storm arrived, the east wind had brought the locusts. Exodus chapter 10, verse 21. Everybody say, Pharaoh remained. It says, so the Lord said to Moses, lift your hand towards heaven. The land of Egypt will be covered with a darkness so thick you can feel it. So Moses lifted his hand to the sky, and a deep darkness covered the entire land of Egypt for 3 days. But Pharaoh remained stubborn. Everybody say, Pharaoh remained. Anybody ever been in the dark so much that you didn't know how you were going to get out of it? I have been. When I was a kid, I was playing tackle football. I pulled one of my friends down on top of me. His head hit me right in the right eye. Middle of the night, that night, it was dark. So dark I couldn't see. I got up middle of the night. I went to walk out my bedroom door to use the bathroom, and I smashed my face on the door frame. Now I had 2 black eyes. Why? Because my right eye was already jacked up, couldn't hardly see. Now it was dark, and I walked in the door with my left eye. So I know what it's like to be in the dark, and you feel like you just can't see. The thing is, I know what that's like spiritually as well. When I look back on my life, and there are times where I think I have actually been somewhere or done something, but in reality, I was blind. More than I would like to admit. Times in my life where I really couldn't see what I thought I could see. In the Exodus chapter 11, here we're coming in for a landing. This is the part I want to sit on for a minute. I want you to understand. The Lord said to Moses, I will strike Pharaoh in the land of Egypt with one more blow. You ever get to the end of a movie and you kind of feel the tension? Like the plot thickens. The couple is back together. They realize they loved each other anyway. Now they're going to go figure out what they're going to do to fix this big worldwide problem. That's where we're at. The plot thickens. It says, Pharaoh will let you leave the country. In fact, he will be so eager to get rid of you that he will force you to leave. Tell all the Israelite men and women to ask their Egyptian neighbors for articles of silver and gold. Wait, we've had locusts, we've had blood, we've had gnats, we've had flies, and you want us to go tell the Egyptians to give us all their wealth? This is your plan. And in verse 4, it says, Moses had announced to Pharaoh, this is what the Lord says, at midnight tonight I will pass through the heart of Egypt. All the firstborn sons will die in every family in Egypt, from the oldest son to Pharaoh who sits on his throne to the oldest son of the lowliest servant girl who grinds the flour. Even the firstborn of all livestock will die. He says the firstborn. This is the next generation of leaders. This is the next generation of leaders in Egypt. This is those who are going to be on the throne. This is those who have been prepared, who have been academically schooled. These aren't just the babies. These are people who are ready to take leadership. This is where it rested on. This is the group that now was anticipating taking over this entire country. But if you remember back in Genesis chapter 1, Pharaoh had every newborn baby thrown into the Nile. Every newborn, he killed. Talk about genocide. He killed all of these Hebrew babies. He threw them into the water. All of these parents that had their babies thrown into the water. And so now Pharaoh is sitting here and they're being struck by the hand of God. In 2017, a discovery was made that contained child tombs just north of Egypt. And many archaeologists believe these were tombs, Hebrews' children, that Pharaoh had enslaved. In fact, they haven't proven it, but archaeologically, they found a lot of these children, their bodies were stacked on top of each other carelessly in these tombs, and a lot of their bones were fractured. They had spinal fractures, which they said would have been a result of the labor that Pharaoh would have put on top of them as Hebrews. I don't think when we read scriptures, we truly understand the devastation that these people lived in for 4 centuries. I don't think we really feel the story. I think we've heard it so many times that we become apathetic to what is actually taking place in this scripture. We look at it as God being faithful, and he is this cushy God that serves everybody strawberry cupcakes. But I am here to tell you, there is a darkness and a evil and a demonic that has rested on Egypt, and Pharaoh has taken their children and thrown them into a river to kill them. And there are other children that he is using as slaves. There are people that you would say they're not old enough to work, that he is brutally battering for his good to build his kingdom. And when every day that Moses is going to him and things are happening, the slavery is not stopping. The oppression isn't stopping. How many of you pray for God to do something and all of a sudden you feel like he's just not doing it? He's not acting on my behalf. People are still dying, God. I'm still struggling, God. I'm still suffering, God. And what I'm trying to help you understand today is that the brutality of this story and the darkness of what he did to these people is something that we have never experienced. An entire kingdom was being built on the back of a group of people, including their children. We don't understand the deliverance if you can't understand the depth of the story of what God was actually doing and the love that he was doing to relieve these people of the pain that they were experiencing. The intensity of the slavery of the Hebrews cannot be understated. Can you imagine this group of people thinking, we're the ones that are going to be freed from captivity? All these years, you don't think that their parents and their grandparents and their great-grandparents sat around and said, one day we're not going to be here anymore. There's a promised land that awaits us. One day we're going to be in that promised land. One day we're going to be in a better place than this. You don't think that was conversation at the dinner table where they were longing for something better than what they were experiencing? You don't think that was something that was consistent with them to say, one day we're going to be doing something greater than this. We're not going to be stuck in Egypt, but we're actually going to have our own lands and our own crops and our own last name that had inheritance. You don't think that was a dream? You don't think they dreamt because they were slaves? They did. They did. And what I'm trying to help you understand is that this intensity of the deliverance cannot be understated. There was a passion for Pharaoh to oppress these people to get what he wanted. There was a passion for Pharaoh to push these people down to get what he wanted. But in your life, we think that these different tests are taking place and that God's always poking and prying. No, the test of faith is when we are asked to prepare for the promise while we are still in captivity. Whenever you can't see it, you're telling me for 430 years, your family has been in captivity, but now all of a sudden you're the one who's going to get freed. You're telling me for all this time that you're the generation that's going to do this? Oh, wait, so you're the one that's going to lead this entire country back to the Lord? You're telling me that after all this time, you're the one who has divine revelation. You're the one. You're the one who understands this better than anybody. 4 centuries, and you're the generation that's getting freed? But God said you need to begin to prepare because it's really hard to see. Go ask your Egyptians for articles of silver and gold. Take their wealth from them. Prepare for the promise. Get the goods for the temple that's eventually going to be built for me. In Exodus chapter 12, verse 1, and then we're going to jump down to verse 11. It says, when the Israelites were still in the land of Egypt, everybody say, still there. The Lord gave the following instructions to Moses and Aaron. He said, these are your instructions for eating this meal. So now they're talking about the Passover. He said, you're going to eat this meal, and this is something you're going to celebrate. He said, these are your instructions for eating this meal. Be fully dressed, wear your sandals, and carry your walking stick in your hand. Eat the meal with urgency, for this is the Lord's Passover. And on that night, I will pass through the land of Egypt, and I will strike down every firstborn son and firstborn male animal in the land of Egypt. I will execute judgment against all the gods of Egypt, for I am the Lord. But the blood on their doorposts will serve as a sign, making the houses you're staying in. When I see the blood, I will pass over you. This plague of death will not touch you when I strike the land of Egypt. He's saying, listen, you're going to take the blood from this Passover and you got to put it above your door, and the death angel is going to pass over your house. So he's saying, you're going to do you not think they would look crazy? I need you to be fully dressed, ready to run out of this place when you're eating this meal. Because if I call you out, you got to get up and you got to run. And then I want you to take blood and put it above your doorpost. This is public humiliation at its finest. You see, we want the promise, but we don't want to do anything public. God, if this could just be between us and then I can get the public praise, but I don't want to actually be publicly faithful to the promise. You know why I told you about my house in July that we were looking to buy? Do you know why I told you that? It's because God said, this is my story and this is your accountability. Because I want the people to see that I will do it. We had 3 buyers, lost 2 of them, got the 3rd. You know what's so funny about that whole process? Is anybody who's been to our house knows there's no way, these people, how much money are they making? Well, let me explain it to you. I'm glad you asked. I've never made 6 figures working at this church. This church is great, but I don't make that kind of money here. We're a church plant. We're 10 years, right? We're building campuses off of buildings given to us, properties in Oakland, Maryland. Come on, somebody, you can thank God for that. Yeah, like it doesn't make sense. We own property in other states that God is giving us to launch churches that are completely paid for. I don't make that kind of money here. Let me help you understand God's finances. We moved into a house, lived in it for 6 years in the oceanfront. We thought we would live there for the rest of our life. We made $50,000 off that house. We moved to another house. We invested $50,000 in that new house. My wife and I took out multiple loans, second mortgages, and put a ton of money into that second house to rebuild it. Made over $250,000 on that house in 2.5 years. Why? God led us there. I didn't even want to move there. I told my wife, this is not my style. And God says, this is what I have. And so we said, all right, well, we'll live here through my kids until they're done. And with that and an inheritance, we were able to buy where we're at. And people want to know, hey, well, where's the money coming from? God, because I ain't make that kind of money. My wife and I, every investment we've ever made, God's led us to. Every investment we've made outside of this church, God has said, hey, put your money here. We've done it. And what happens? It grew. Funny that. It grew. And some of you want something so bad from God, but it's because you want that thing more than you want God. And you're wondering, well, give it to me, God. And for me, I told her, I got to a place when we lived on Hope Avenue. I love that house and I love that neighborhood. And it was sweet. A lot of y'all were in Hope Avenue. If y'all were in Hope Avenue, raise your hand real quick. Let me see some of y'all. There's a lot of y'all. Yeah, a lot of y'all were in Hope Avenue. That was my stomping grounds, man. It's my place. We loved it. I would never want it for anything else. We actually had plans to live there until we were 89. If I made it that long. But it's funny because if you don't understand, people that don't understand God will never understand my story, so why share it, right? That's what you think. I've never had anybody ask me, well, how much money you make, Pastor? Because that's just not our culture. And honestly, it's not our DNA, and I'll never tell you, so it doesn't matter if you ask. I'm not telling you what any of my staff makes. It's the way it works. My point is this. People feel entitled to your life if God's not moving in theirs the same way. They want to know, why is that happening? Why is that happening in my life? Well, I can give you a couple of reasons. Number one, you're still looking beside you instead of in front of you. Because if you're asking that question, you're comparing. You're not repented. You're certainly not submitted. Because I asked that question a long time when I was pastoring. God, why is their church doing this? And why is that doing that? I left Great Neck Middle one Sunday, one of the biggest Sundays we ever had. It was overflow. And I'm driving home and I pulled in at Why Not Pizza on Great Neck. Everybody say amen. I wasn't there to eat. I was there to vent. And God said, Brandon, you're the only one who cares how big this church gets. He's like, when you care about the people like that, their church will grow and it won't be the same. I care about numbers. You better believe it. There's 500,000 people in this city. We know how many people are in Garrett County. We know the percentage of them. We know what their average income is. We know the demographics and DNA. Thank you, Pastor Brandon Cooper, for doing the research so that we're ready to launch a campus in Garrett County. We know what y'all make. Not really, but I just wanted to make you feel like I know what you don't about your income. But we know what the city looks like. We know the demographics of the Green Run area. We know the demographics of the Strawbridge area when we launched. We know the demographics of Great Neck area when we launched. My point is this. I looked so much to the right and left of me, and I was trying to strive and keep up, and I was wondering, why are they getting blessed and I'm not? And the only thing it did was made me feel like I was standing there, and the gnats were coming, and the boils were coming, and the locusts were coming, but they were the only ones getting delivered from captivity. And what God showed me was that, Brandon, I could have done one plague, but they needed all 10. There was a purpose in everything that I did. The magicians were shouting my name 3 plagues in, saying, their God, that guy, that is real. And what I'm trying to help you understand is that don't try to understand everybody else. You let God do in you what only He can do. You can look at my finances as your pastor, and I can tell you it's going to make as much sense to you after you look at them as it does right now. I've had financial advisors look at my finances. You know their exact words to me? Like years ago, they said, well, you got nothing left every month. I said, that's what I'm saying, but why am I talking to you? They said, you're doing a good job with it. That's it? That's what you got for me? They said, yep. I said, okay, thank you. And we moved into our last house. We kept borrowing the bank's money to build out things. I said, God, you got to come through because I don't know if I'm going to be able to pay this all off in 2.5 years when the payments are kicking in. And God said, just trust me. We kept putting into the house and building into the house. And I have a brother-in-law who's an amazing magician of anything that needs to be built. And thank God for him. I owe him about $100,000. I'll never pay him that. But my point is, God just kept showing us, and he opens up and things start multiplying. And whenever we moved into the house we're in now, God said to me, He said, this is my story. You've got to share it. You got to share my story. In fact, my in-laws are moving into the property. And whenever God showed me this property in July, that's my brother-in-law. Yeah, he not only fixes things, he is my right-hand guy. He brought the podium out. He traveled with me all over the world before we ever planted palms. I mean, that's the kind of people you need around you. You know what I'm saying? Picks up the mic. I mean, we're here 25 years in. I knew him in 5th grade and he still picked up the mic. That's the only reason greatness surrounds me, right? I'm mediocre. They're all great. But when you understand that, I tell my staff that all the time, and I mean it. I'm the most replaceable guy on my team. If something happens to me, y'all be good. If something happens to Brandon, y'all are in trouble. Something happens to Pastor Corey, Good luck. This thing's closing down. But what I want you to understand, I don't want this to be a rant. I want it to be something where you truly understand the move of God in your life. When God showed me that house, God showed me, like my in-laws, I can't tell you what they've done for my wife and I. We've lived in their house. They have given to us financially, and they have poured into my life and poured into my wife's life, and they have done more for us than I can even begin to tell you. My parents have done that. And God said, I'm gonna bless generations through your life, Brandon. And he showed me a picture of them before he showed me my own family. He says, trust me in this. I said, well, Lord, I don't know. I trust you, but now I don't know if I trust this. I don't know if I trust it. The second offer came in on our house, and we were a week away from closing. And on Monday morning, my wife and I talked about what we felt God called us to give to the church for our one day. And I knew God said double it, but I really felt like the first gift was more than I was willing to give. So I don't know. Oh, glory. I know that Satan is in our presence. Did you hear that? He said double it. I thought he said double it. I thought he said double it. My wife said he did. That day, on the Monday, we were a week from closing. I got a call from my realtor. He said the offer just fell through because the buyer lost his house that he was selling. Their offer fell through. He said, do you want to just redo this one? And I said, no, put it back on the market. I know God's gonna do a miracle. Put it back on the market the next day. 2 days later, we got an offer on our house that was the difference to the dollar of what we wanted to give the church. God said, I will build my church. Is it my money? Never was. 3 Christmases ago, I was on Hope Avenue. This Christmas, the kids are riding around on 4-wheelers. And I can tell you, I wasn't any happier. Why? Because I just want to be where he's at. I just want to be where God's at. I just want to be where his presence is at. When I tell you we don't care about stuff, do you know why I mean that? Because we legitimately just want to be where the presence of God is at. And I want you to be encouraged today that there is a promise on your life. And sometimes the reason we're missing it is because we're not fully dressed at the Passover meal, ready to go with an urgency to wherever he leads us. And sometimes we're just not willing to do the public things that make the private sector look a little weird. I'm not gonna put blood over my doorpost. It's never been done. This isn't what we do. And God is saying, but the death angel will pass over and your children will be saved. Are we willing to do the things that just don't make sense? My realtor looked at me. He said, if I didn't know who you were and I hadn't done this multiple times before with you, I would think you're a lunatic. And I said, Kevin, watch God. And I said, I promise you, this offer is about to come in and it's going to cover a difference. And I told him how much. He laughed and he said, well, I believe you because I've seen this before. And it did. Watch God. Watch him do what only he can do. And Moses was saying, I'm ready. We got all the people, the millions of people are here, God. We're eating our meal and we're dressed. We're ready to go whenever you're ready to deliver us. And what the Lord is saying is that deliverance will come. Everybody say, deliverance will come. Come on now, say it like you know it. Say, deliverance will come. Now, I know some of you feel like you're left out today. You feel like you don't understand. You feel like you're overwhelmed. I want you to say, deliverance will come. Now, one more time. I know some of you are heavy today. I know you feel like you have done the unpardonable sin. I know you feel like you're never going to have your life organized again, but I'm telling you, you're wrong. It will come. He is the promise keeper. He is your deliverer. He is everything he says he's going to be. He is righteous. He is omnipresent. He is in love with you. He sees your pain. He sees the turmoil. He sees the gaps. Now, I want you to say it like you believe it. Say, deliverance will come. Now give him a shout of praise for a minute, like you know he's gonna do it. Come on, like you know he's gonna do it, like you know he's faithful to his promises. He will do it in your life. I'm telling you, Palms, he will do it in your life. That's why I'm standing here this morning, pouring my heart out to you about something I just walked into. Because it was the first time in my life where I felt like God saw me. Is that not sad? My house cost over $1 million. Do y'all hear me? We paid over $1.15 million. Ashley Love, you've been here a long time. You're a preacher's kid. You know me. You've seen where we came from. You get this. You hear these stories and you've lived them. I'm not trying to hold back. You go online and look it up. Look up my address. It'll tell you what we paid for it. I'm not trying to be hiding. Why? This isn't my story. My wife and I look like millionaires to you. I got 4 kids. I told Taylor this morning, if I had to carry my kids, I never would have had them. I said, women are amazing. What God does is amazing, but I don't like my kids enough to carry them for 9 months. Not a chance. What women do for your families, gosh, you guys are amazing. Man, you're amazing. Women are amazing. Not just because you're great leaders and you're anointed and you're prophets, but you're amazing as mothers. You're amazing. And I believe that with all my heart. I honor my wife. She's amazing. The way she loves our boys. Gosh, I just don't get it. I love them with all my heart, but it's different for her. She's amazing. Ladies, you guys are amazing. I mean that. Wow, what you've done for society and to build the kingdom and the way, you're amazing. I really am in awe. Whether or not you've had a child, you're amazing. Gosh, women are they overwhelm me with how incredible they are, how much they love, and the moments they know to speak into moments with, they're just amazing to me. If it was up to fellas, we'd be in a tough spot. But I'm trying to tell you this today because I'm not hiding anything from you and I'm not gloating about anything. Nothing I have gained. Everything I have belongs to the Lord. And I can tell you this, and I would never have said this 3 years ago, but the one thing I can tell you now is I know my wife and I sit at the table. I've never been the hero in a story, but I will tell you this. After the 3 months of the depths of hell we went through this fall, the longest 3 months of my life, my wife and I sat at that table prepared and ready to go. And so did my boys. That's why I tell you the story. They were ready to go. They went through the same things we went through. They went through the same losses in those 3 months we went through. They went through the same questioning, and I will share this, but I can only share so much because I don't want to get put in prison. So it's a joke, man. Chill out. Y'all need to chill out. Golly. Y'all think I'm that shady? Find another church. This ain't your place, man. See, the reason, Pastor Buddy, you know why he's on staff? Because I know even if I was going to prison, he'd be in the car with me running. So it's all good. If I needed bailed out, I know I could never call him because he'd be right beside me in his cell. That's what I'm saying. That's my ride or die. Ain't that right, buddy? That's why whenever he became an elder of the church, you know what God said to me? Put people around you that you know will fight. I was like, Buddy Rivera, he'll go in a kilt on the top of that mountain in the snow and start slaying it. It don't matter. He's a ride or die. My point is this. You need to surround yourself with people in your life that you know will love you like that unconditionally, and they will see the best, but I want you to understand this concept. The very last moment we could close on that house before we had to start the whole process again, it may not have worked out, was on a Monday. On Friday, we were supposed to close. And there were so many things going on with our current house. We were selling in our personal finance. There was stuff that we were having to do and pay out. And it was kind of a mess, but I knew God had it. And Friday night, we didn't close. Saturday, and my realtor was like, man, I don't know if this is going to go. We might not be able to do it next Tuesday. And my lender had already told me if it goes past Monday, we got to start the process again. And I knew then we could be in, there was just a lot going on. I was going to say that. And God said, Brandon, do you trust me? I said, man, I trust you, but I don't know if I trust this. Saturday comes around, he's like, we can't, obviously Friday night, he's like, we're going to close on Monday. We'll close by 2:00. And he said, we'll try to close by noon. I get a call around 10. He said, hey, we're not going to close at 10 or 12. We're not going to close at 2. He said, the last time we could possibly close on Monday is at 5 to get everything filed. I said, okay, so what if it doesn't happen? He says, we got to do the whole process starting on Tuesday. And I was thinking, well, I know that this is not going to work out. This probably won't work out to our benefit because just there's so much that happened in the last 3 months. So Monday at 5:00, my realtor calls me and says, we're a go, baby. 4:30, we're a go. See you at 5. And we leave our house, and we had all of our trucks are packed, and we're just sitting at our house waiting. Like, if this doesn't go, we have to move somewhere. And we're driving on the way to the closing office. And the song comes on, Christ is my firm foundation, the rock on which I stand. Everything around me is shaking. And I just start weeping. And my wife looks at me and she says, don't start. I didn't even say anything. I'm just sitting there and tears are dripping off my face. Because I remember when I looked at that house in July, I walked the property and I said, God, people know I can't afford this. It's embarrassing to live here. He said, yeah, but when you're okay with that is when I'll do it. Whenever you're okay with people knowing only I did it, I'll continue to do more. Through Palms, through your life, because that's whenever you give me all of it. And we finished closing. And actually one of the ladies at the closing was like, man, I know your church. I actually know Buddy. And you guys know Buddy. He grew up in Virginia Beach. He knows everybody. She's like, yeah, I watch you guys. And I stopped for a minute and God said, tell them my story. And my in-laws and my wife had walked out and I stopped there with all the people, the closing agents and my realtor, and my finance guy, and I stopped and I said, hey, let me tell you guys a quick story about how this happened. And God's been so heavy on my heart. I haven't shared a lot of it. I've traveled and preached a little bit this fall, and I've shared the story a lot more other places than I have here. I think it's because it's kind of hard. Sometimes it's harder to talk to your family about things than it is people you won't see that often. And I think the reason it's hard for me to talk about it, and it's taken me so long to even get to this point, and there's still details that I'll share at a future date. It's just, I think the truth is I'm still walking through the value that I felt like I needed in that to even feel God in my life sometimes. Like it was like when we finally got it, I was like, God, you've seen me all these years. Like it wasn't in vain. Like, but God saw us all along. But it was just a really hard time I had to walk through to get to that place. I'll never forget it. My wife and I, we have more than one checking account, okay? But I'm gonna tell you this. When we closed, the money was supposed to be from our house, was supposed to be wired. It was going to take like a couple hours or a day. Our main checking, they can't take my house, can they, buddy? I know you used to be mortgaged. I had 78 cents left. God told us, I'm going to need you to give me everything. I had 78 cents left in my checking account. My realtor wrote, it just went through. I refreshed it. I had $145,000 in my checking account. That fast. I told my wife, I said, our credit cards are maxed. I don't know where we're going to eat dinner. Like, we don't have any money. My parents don't even know this, so I'm not looking at them when I say this. My point is this. Palms, I'm begging you. Trust God. I'm not comfortable telling you these stories because I'd much rather you just look at my life and be like, that dude's balling. Honestly, man, I want you to look at me like, bro, that dude's got it together. Living at home, him and his family's doing good. I promise you. BP could tell you, the church this fall, we were getting ready for Oakland and the financial things we had to go through as a church behind the scenes y'all never knew about, getting things prepped, and just, it was a lot of weight that we were carrying this fall. And I'm sitting here telling the story. People say, well, it's a prosperity gospel. The gospel is a prosperity gospel, meaning Satan tries to steal people. I'm not asking you to send $20 in to an evangelist because you need $2,000. That's not the gospel. The gospel is give to me everything you have and I'll multiply everything that you give me, whatever that is. So if you don't have what you feel like you should have, give him more. That's just what it is. This isn't even a tithing message. I'm just trying to get you to understand the context of what God is doing in my life. And I'm here to tell you there is nothing behind the curtain here. This is exposing I just told you what was in my checking account 3 months ago. I'm trying to help you understand that what you see is what you get with God. And when he said, I need you to eat this meal and prepare for deliverance, I had decided not to tell this story today. But I was sitting here talking to you. The Holy Spirit was so clear to me, share my story. So, okay, I got a couple of them in here. Share my story. I'll share that one. Okay, I'll just share parts. Share the story, Brandon. Because I'm trying to help you understand there is no gimmick. This is God, and he is faithful. And you got to be wise, and you got to steward, and you can budget as much as you want. But I'm telling you, there is no financial plan that is greater than the generosity God puts in your heart to give to him. Some of you are struggling so bad with, should I tithe? I am here to tell you, you can't not tithe. You can't not give to God what's God. You can't not go above that. It always cracks me up when people feel like they have an entitlement. I want to know what God's doing with all the money in the church. Look around you, man. What do you mean, what is he doing? We're getting ready to launch a campus in Maryland. Do you know the sacrifices the staff has made for this church? The staff here, the sacrifices they have made for your lives, the sacrifices that so many people have made that call this place home. I'm trying to tell you that God is in front of us in a way that I can't even begin to show you, but you will see it. We're getting a building here in Virginia Beach. It's coming and it's quick. 2025, I'm believing that is our year. But the reason I don't push it here, because I don't want you to think that way. Because that doesn't stop us. Getting a building doesn't make us spiritual. It just means we have a building and a payment. I don't care about all that. 10 years in, that ain't a sign of success. We could have had a building 7 years ago. Pastor Matt and I walked around years ago around buildings. We prayed over buildings. I was like, this is not what God has. We could have had it, but it wasn't what God had. My point is, God is doing something supernatural in your life. And I'm trying to show you, he's done it in mine. He's doing it in mine. And I've made a lot of mistakes. And I know if I can do it, you can do it. And this is what he's trying to teach the Israelites, is that deliverance is going to come to those who prepare for the promise while still in captivity. Deliverance will come. Everybody say, deliverance will come. Very quickly, Exodus chapter 12, verse 29 says, that night at midnight, the Lord struck down all the firstborn sons in the land of Egypt, from the firstborn son of Pharaoh, who sat on his throne, to the firstborn son of the prisoner in the dungeon. Even the firstborn of their livestock were killed. Pharaoh and all his officials and all the people of Egypt woke up during the night, and loud wailing was heard throughout the land of Egypt, and there was not a single house where someone had not died. Listen, only you can be responsible for your preparation. Only you. I can't tell you the amount of people that don't like their life and the trajectory and the way things are going, and so they try to reflect it on their church or their pastors or their bosses or their spouses. Only you can be responsible for your preparation. If the Israelites were in slavery for more than 4 centuries and they can prepare like they were going to be the generation that was leaving, then I don't think we have an excuse for why we're still in captivity. Only you can be responsible for this. I can't change your heart. You may need me to validate you. You want something specific from somebody, but listen, you'll be angry and empty if it's not coming from God. You think something should be done a certain way here in every area of your life, and we live like if people would do what we need, then we'd be prepared. That's not the way this works. Only you are responsible. It's called maturity. So what do? You prepare for the promise. Prepare for it. You stand with me this morning. There's 4 things I'm going to tell you as you're standing. Say, how do I prepare for the promise? There's 4 things I'm going to tell you. Because these are things I have to do, and these are things I do all the time. They're not going to be on the screen. These are sub-points, all right? These are the bonuses. 4 things you have to do to prepare. And the first thing is this: be honest with yourself. Be honest. I can't tell you the amount of times I see people go through a really tough time in life and they run over sin like it was something in the past, like it's not that big of a deal. Oh, it's just a sin. If you don't deal with that sin, I'm telling you, it is a festering wound in your life that it will come back around, and when it does, it's going to be uglier, bigger, heavier, and hit harder than you've ever thought before. Can I say one thing? Fellas, would you please lead your home? Please lead. Stop waiting for somebody else to do it for you. Please, stand in front of your family. I'll tell you what it is. Well, we're co-leaders. My wife is as strong of a woman that I know. You think she's gonna let me step on her? 1, that's crappy leadership. 2, I'm a mess without this woman in my life. The 2 are 1, right? Let me tell you what leadership looks like, fellas. How many of you, if somebody breaks into your house, babe, go get him. You guys laugh. But you don't laugh when I say, fellas, leave your home, because you don't look at it the same. You see, what it is, when you're not leading your home, you're asking your wife to go fight the spiritual battles. Oh, well, she's just tough. No, you're a coward. I'm sorry, that was crude, but it's true. The reason you have sin in your life, or any marriage that's dealt with sexual sin in this room, any couple that's dealt with that, whether it's been adultery, or if it's been a lust of the flesh that you can't seem to get rid of, or if whatever it is, the reason that adds such a dissection to your marriage is because you're not leading, and so it's every man for himself, right? For either partner. But fellas, you wouldn't kick your wife out the bed and say, go get them. They look dangerous. There's like 3 of them down there and all. They look scary. No. But we do that to them spiritually when you're not leading your home. You have opinions, you want to gossip, you want to tell your wife all the things that she ain't doing right or all the things you got a problem with, but you're not willing to really stand in front and lead your home and be the man that God has called you to be. So what it does when you're a spiritual leader, it means I'm going to stand in front, I'm going to take the shots so that my family doesn't have to take them. I'm going to take the shot to the chin so that my kids and my wife don't have to take them. Does that make sense? That's what spiritual leadership is. It's not about authority in the home. And are you kidding me? That's not good leadership anyway. So why do we make it about a man domineering? That's not what spiritual leadership is. Spiritual leadership says my wife knows that when that darkness wants to creep in my door, that she's got a man of God standing in front of her saying, no, not in my home. Thou shalt not be moved. I am a tree planted by a stream of living water, and I will not be moved. That's spiritual leadership. That's what leading your home looks like. Well, I'm just going to walk them. We'll just see where things go. And that's why you keep going in circles. Let's see where things go, brother. Go ahead. Yeah, good luck, bro. You in trouble. Does this make sense to you? We have a responsibility. And by not leading, you're stepping away and your family is taking all the shots. Left, right, uppercut. Prepare for the promise. 1, be honest with yourself. 2, be honest with others. It's something to me, it's funny how some people will go through stuff and they just want to hide it from everybody. I'm not saying you have to broadcast your business. I think there's an opposite where you broadcast your business because you're just bleeding all over people. But the other one is when people are asked, why don't you be honest? Say, I'm working through something. Why? Community can't help you. You go to the doctor and tell them you stubbed your toe, but really you can't breathe. How much is that going to help? Same in the church. Number 3, we're all surrendered to something. You can deny it and lie to it and say what you, we're all surrendered to something. If you care more about diplomacy than you do discipleship, then you will continue to be where you're at for a long time. You care more about what people see you as and what your husband thinks you are and what the world sees you as or your wife thinks you are or your boyfriend girl. You care more about the look than you do the actual discipleship. You're going to be in this circle for a long time and it's just going to do this. Be marching just like the Israelites. Why? Because it ain't about what people think or what people see. It's about what you really are. It's about being honest. It's about you are surrendered to something. You say, well, I'm not going to surrender this, God. It's just, I like control. You're even a greater fool in your own mind if you think that you're in control without God. And then the last piece is this. We are all preparing for something. You may not even know what it is. You may say, well, I don't really have the promise. You're preparing for something in your life. You're either preparing and you're trying to get healed so your marriage can move forward. You're preparing and you're trying to do something financially so you can be into tithe, which is an awful thing to do. Like, just give, right? Let me tell you your best financial move you could ever do, give, tithe to your local church. Not to everybody else, to your local church. Start there. And I promise you, it'll go beyond anything you can think, ask, or imagine. What you have to understand is that we are all preparing and that God is moving. This morning I was walking and I walk and I pray in the morning and I hate my glasses and I don't like to wear them a lot because I just don't like wearing them. And so I was wearing them this morning because it was so early and I was exhausted and had my beanie on and I had my scarf around my face and I was trying to walk. It was 9 degrees out and I'm going down the driveway and my glasses fog up. And I'm like, this is why I hate you. You guys are worthless. These glasses are stupid. Hate wearing them. So mad right now. Stupid glasses. You should be ashamed of yourself. You guys laugh. If you knew what went on in my head, it'd probably be a great TV show and you'd never want to hear from me ever again. I'm like, this is ridiculous. This is why I don't wear you. So I'm walking back to the house and going back and forth. I couldn't see anything at this point, but I wasn't willing to take them off. And I tried to take them off and my eyeballs froze. So I put them back on and I was looking to the right and the left. And the only thing I could see was the sides of the driveway and in the beginning of the grass, but they were completely fogged up. And I'm like, this is so stupid. Why am I out here even praying? I'm mad. I don't want to pray when I'm mad because I'm mad, you know? This is why I don't wear you. The one day in the last 3 years that I wore my glasses outside of watching TV in my bedroom at night, I can't see. And so I took them off and I was like, well, this is a little better. I can't make everything out, but I can at least see the road. And I felt like the Lord stirred me. And I was like, God, you're not going to give me an illustration about glasses in the morning when I'm mad, are you? Like, that's how bitter I was. He spoke to me and I was like, no, I'm sick and tired of like the pastor illustrations. Every time I like hear from you, it's like an illustration for everybody. He's like, okay, don't tell him. He's like, use it for you then. Stubborn old boy. I said, okay, but you already told me, I'm going to tell you. I had my glasses on, and they were fogged up, and I could only see a little bit to the right and the left on the driveway. And then when I took them off, I felt like I was more in control because I could see further. I could see everything, and I could make it out, and I was probably safer in my mind. But you know what God told me? He says, you think you can see more, but you can't see any clearer without your glasses on. You can't see any clearer with these on all fogged up than you can when you take them off. You just feel like you can see more. And he says, I am those glasses. When you put these things, you allow me to be your lens in your life, you will see in a clarity you've never seen before. And you know when they get fogged up, you've got nothing, bro. You take them off, you thought, well, now I'm in control. I can't see as good, but I can see good enough. He's like, no, you'll still get hit by a car with them off as you will with them on. You just won't see it as clearly. Why? Because we want the control, so we take these things off and we feel like, well, now I can feel things around me. God said, but you still can't see clarity. You can see a little further, you think, but what did it provide you? And I'm wondering how many of us today, we're preparing for something, but we just keep taking these things off. God saying, let me be your clarity. Hey, thanks so much for watching. And don't forget to subscribe so that you don't miss any new content or videos. We're here live every week. We'll see you soon.